Hi, and welcome to Mid-Price Magic and our very first deck tech. The deck text of the day, as you might guess from the art, is Elves. So fair warning about this deck. One, it's a very cheap deck, so I want to say under budget. This is about $35 depending on the deals you can get. But every single card in this deck in the main board is an elf, and every single one of them is a creature. This deck runs no non-creature spells because it can really get around control, and also, if you get your creatures big enough, you don't have to worry about removal. Today we're going to be doing budget Pioneer Elves. It might not be as popular as Commander and Modern Elves, but with the right cards you can really make it work, and it's very consistent, can win in the fast game and the long game, as long as you get a few certain cards. So let's get into it. The strategy for this deck is to first use your little mana dorks like Elvish Mystic to get your cheaper lords. Then you attack fast, go on the more aggro. As the game progresses, if you can't take them out in the early game, play cards like the lovely lady in the background of your screen right now, and then trample them over, gain as much life as you can, and just beat them down because all your little guys will then be like 5/5s. For me showing you this deck, I'll show you every single card in the deck and basically give you a short explanation on why I put in this deck and why I believe it is needed to make this deck work as well as it does. The first card in this deck is a playset of Elvish Mystic. This card is really simple. You're probably going to get a Forest turn 1. If you can get this guy out, then you can get your other mana dorks and also your other lords out very quickly. And it just also is a thing that you can pump up a bunch and hit them for a bunch of damage really quick. The second card is Gnarl Root Trapper. If you're not familiar with this card, it's 1 black to tap and pay 1 life and add a green to your mana pool. And you can tap it to give an attacking elf Death Touch. This is just used so that if I want to attack and they declare blocks with their big guys, I can kill them off with my Death Touch. And also, it's a good mana dork if I only have access to black mana. It's a recommended card in this deck. The next card on this list is 2 versions of Dwynen's Elite. If you're not familiar with it, it's a green and 1 for a 2/2 elf. When it enters the battlefield, if you control an elf, you get a 1/1 elf token. This is in here because it allows you to get your board state up really quick and works really well with the lords. And also, there's a card that I'll bring up later that works on when elves enter the battlefield. It gets bigger and better, and this works really well with it and gives it a bunch more counters. The fourth card is a playset of Elvish Clan Caller. If you're not familiar with it, it's 2 green for a basic 1/1 Lord. If you're not familiar with Lord, it gives a certain creature type +1/+1 all across the board. So this one gives all other elves +1/+1. Its second ability is you can pay 6 and tap it to grab another version of Elvish Clan Caller from the deck and put it right onto the battlefield. This works great in the late game and helps in the early game too. If you're not familiar with this card, it's a green and a 1 for a 2/3 elf druid that has whenever it's the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, you get a 1/1 elf. And you can pay 6 mana to give it +4/+4 until end of turn. I put this in because it's a great thing to have your opponents have to waste removal on. You still get a 1/1 elf. And if you can get a bunch of elves, again, the lords will then make them into giant elves and beat down your opponents. The sixth card in this deck are 2 Wildwood Preservers. This is in this deck because it's a good reach creature mainly, so it can block flyers, which there's not a lot of in this deck. And also, in the late game, if you can only have a few like a Thorn Lieutenant in your hand and you play that out, you can then pour your mana into making this card a very big creature very quickly and swing in for a lot of damage. The 7th card is a playset of Marwyn the Nurturer. This is a card that I said works so well with Dwynen's Elite. Basically, if you're not familiar with it, it's a 1/1 for a green and 2 that has whenever an elf enters the battlefield, Marwyn gets a +1/+1 counter, and you can tap it for green equal to its power. It's so powerful because if you get a bunch of elves, this can just get even more mana and get you even more elves. The 8th card in this deck are a playset of Shaman of the Hunt. This is a black, green, and 1 for a 3/2 elf. But when it enters the battlefield, your opponent loses life equal to the number of elves you control. Which means if you play this in a late game and you have a lot of elves, you can easily just drain your opponent for like 10 damage. Also, it's a pretty good blocker if you need it when you're trying to defend against the beatdown. The biggest drawing card this deck is 4 Steel Leaf Champions. This is 3 green for a 5/4 elf with it can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less. So basically, I try and pump this card up. You can normally get the mana because a lot of the time, like you're getting a lot of green mana from your Elvish Mystics and Marwins. But basically, it means that they can't just jump block you with a 1/1. They actually have to put a good creature in front of it. The last card in this main board is a playset of Dwynen Gilt Leaf Dane. If you're not familiar with it, it's 2 green and 2 for a 3/4 reach with all other elves get +1/+1. And also, whenever it attacks, you gain 1 life for each other attacking elf you control. This is in this deck because it's the other lord in this deck to pump up your elves, and also it can gain us a bunch of life if you're on the beatdown, and honestly, it's the finisher. The lands for this deck are 2 Westvale Abbeys, 2 Unclaimed Territories, 8 Swamps, and 13 Forests. The basics I've proven and worked a bunch on. They do work, and you can normally hit all your creatures. Sometimes you don't get a swamp, but the decks can still work with that. Unclaimed Territory, when it enters the battlefield, you choose a creature type, and it can tap for any color. But then you can only use that mana to cast the certain creature type, and I'll talk about Westvale Abbey. If you don't know what Westvale Abbey does, it's a $5 card, so it's a little bit more expensive, but I believe it's really worth it. You basically can tap it for colorless. It's a normal land, but you can pay 5 and tap it and lose 1 life to make a 1/1 cleric, and you can pay 5 and tap it to flip it over into a 9/7 flying lifelink indestructible hasty creature, which you see right now. I basically put this in because it's a great finisher when you have a bunch of useless elves. So, because this deck is all creatures, and particularly all elves, the main problem is removal. That's why the background of this right now is a Tormod's Crypt. If you're not familiar, it's 0 mana for enchantment that you can tap it and sacrifice it to exile target opponent's graveyard. It's mainly to get rid of removal deck for Delirium decks, and I run 4 on the sideboard. For cards like Tormod's Crypt, I would say the same thing. You have to choose what you want in your sideboard. It's all about the meta of where you play. If there's a lot of creatures in your meta, you might want to put some more removal in. But if it's a lot of instant sorceries, you might want to put more reaction in. So overall, it's your choice. But if you comment ideas, we'll try to respond to them on what I believe you should put in. So yeah. Thank you so much for watching. We had a lot of fun making this. Please like and subscribe. The more love you show us, the more videos we can make and the better quality videos we can make. And yeah, look out for the next deck tech or whatever else we choose to make. So yeah, bye.